A billionaire mafia boss just paid $100,000 at a charity auction, not for a date, but to save a woman from public humiliation. The woman? A trauma nurse who once saved his life on a rain-soaked sidewalk 4 years ago. She doesn't remember him. He's never forgotten her. Now he's found her again and he'll protect her from the shadows, even if it means exposing the one weakness that could destroy his entire empire. Will she discover the truth before his enemies do? Stay with me until the end. Like this video and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The chandeliers in this Greenwich Estate ballroom hung like frozen stars, throwing fractured light across 300 faces that Alara Wren wished she'd never seen. Her hands were shaking. She hid them behind her back, fingernails cutting into her palms hard enough to leave marks she'd notice later in the hospital parking lot when she finally let herself breathe. The auctioneer's voice bounced off the vaulted ceiling, cheerful and merciless. Going once for this lovely evening with Miss Alara Wren, a dedicated trauma nurse, ladies and gentlemen. Surely someone wants to support our children's hospital fund. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that had teeth. Alara stood on the small platform in a borrowed navy dress that fit poorly at the waist, feeling like an animal in a zoo exhibit. Somewhere in the back, someone laughed. A woman's laugh, high and sharp. Another joined it. Then a man's voice, low enough that she couldn't make out the words, but loud enough to carry the mockery. She'd been talked into this by her nursing supervisor, Margaret, who'd insisted it would be fun and for a good cause. Margaret wasn't here now. She was probably at home in her townhouse, drinking wine, not standing under a spotlight while rich strangers evaluated her worth in real time and found it wanting. The auctioneer tried again. Come now, gentlemen. Starting bid is only $500. For charity. Nothing. Alara's throat closed. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She'd worked a double shift yesterday, 16 hours in the trauma ward at Queen's General, holding pressure on a gunshot wound to a teenager's abdomen while his mother screamed in the hallway. She'd gone home, showered, slept 4 hours, then taken 2 trains and a cab to get here because Margaret said they were short on volunteers and the hospital needed the publicity. Publicity. Right. This was great publicity. Trauma nurse so undesirable, even rich people won't pretend to care for $500. Anyone? The auctioneer's smile was starting to crack. Surely. I'll start at 1,000. The voice came from somewhere in the middle of the crowd. Male, bored sounding. Alara's eyes found him. A man in his 50s with a red face and a martini glass, grinning at his friends like he'd just told a joke. Wonderful. The auctioneer seized the bid like a lifeline. $1,000? Do I hear $1,500? Silence again. The red-faced man's grin widened. Actually, you know what? I withdraw my bid. Just remembered I have plans that night. His friends erupted in laughter. Alara felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart. That would have been too clean, too poetic. It was something uglier. The part of her that had survived nursing school on student loans and ramen, that had held dying strangers' hands at 3 a.m, that had learned to compartmentalize trauma so she could function. That part was fracturing, and she couldn't stop it. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Sir, you can't just... Can't I? The man raised his glass. Pretty sure I can do whatever I want. That's kind of the point of having money. More laughter. Alara's vision blurred at the edges. She needed to get off this platform. Now. Before she did something stupid like cry in front of these people, or worse, say what she was actually thinking. She took a step toward the stairs. Then every light in the ballroom seemed to dim. Not literally. The chandelier still blazed, but something shifted in the air, a pressure change that made Alara's skin prickle with the same instinct that told her when a patient was about to code, when their body was giving up and there were only seconds to act. A man stood up in the back corner of the room. He didn't rush, didn't shout, just rose from his chair with the kind of deliberate movement that made everyone stop talking and turn to look. Alara couldn't see his face yet, just his silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like an expensive black suit that fit him the way surgical gloves fit her hands. Perfect. Intentional. Dangerous. The crowd parted as he walked forward. Not scrambling out of his way, but shifting with the smooth, unconscious motion of people who recognized a predator and knew better than to get in its path. Alara's breath caught. She still couldn't see his face clearly. The chandeliers threw shadows across his features, but she could see his hands, large, scarred across the knuckles. One hand reached into his jacket pocket and emerged with something black and rectangular, a credit card. He walked straight to the auctioneer's podium, moving through the silent crowd like a shark through still water, and placed the card on the wooden surface with a sound that shouldn't have been audible but somehow was. $100,000, he said. His voice was low, rough-edged, with an accent Alara couldn't quite place. Eastern European, maybe. Russian, the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to fill a room. The auctioneer stared at him. "I'm sorry, did you say 100,000?" The man didn't look at the auctioneer. He was looking at Alara now, and even from 15 feet away she could feel the weight of his gaze. For her dignity, not the date. Alara's heart slammed against her ribs. The ballroom had gone completely silent, the kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums and made you aware of your own heartbeat. The red-faced man who'd withdrawn his bid was standing very still now, his martini glass frozen halfway to his mouth. The women who'd laughed earlier looked like they'd forgotten how. The auctioneer recovered first, his professional smile sliding back into place. "Sir, that's incredibly generous, but the auction is for an evening with... I know what the auction is for." The man's eyes never left Alara. They were dark. She couldn't tell if they were brown or black in this light, and there was something in them that made her forget how to breathe. Recognition, maybe, or something older. "I'm paying for what just happened here. The humiliation, the cruelty. 100,000 should cover it." He turned to face the crowd then, and Alara saw his profile. Sharp jaw, dark hair cut short, a thin scar running from his left eyebrow into his hairline. He wasn't handsome in any conventional way, too hard, too worn, but he had presence like a physical force. "Anyone else want a bid?" His voice was soft now, conversational. "Please, I'd enjoy the competition." Nobody moved, nobody breathed. The man nodded once, like they'd confirmed something he already knew, and turned back to the auctioneer. "Process the payment. All of it goes to the hospital fund. Miss Wren is free to leave." The auctioneer stammered something about paperwork and receipts, but the man was already moving. Not toward Alara, toward the exit, like he'd accomplished what he came for and had no further interest in the outcome. Alara found her voice. "Wait." He stopped. Didn't turn around, just paused mid-step like a wolf deciding whether prey was worth the chase. "I didn't ask you to do that," Alara said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I don't need saving." Now he turned, looked at her directly for the first time, and Alara felt something twist in her stomach. Not fear, not quite, but close. "No," he agreed. "You don't. But they..." He gestured vaguely at the crowd, without taking his eyes off her. "Needed to learn what it costs to treat people like commodities. Consider it a lesson in market economics." He walked toward her then, climbing the 3 steps to the platform, with the easy grace of someone who'd never stumbled in his life. Up close, Alara could see the details Margaret's cheerful recruitment speech hadn't prepared her for. The gray threading through his dark hair near his temples, the old burn scar on the back of his right hand, the way he held himself like a man who'd spent his whole life waiting for the next attack. He stopped 2 feet away from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. "You can refuse the money if you want," he said quietly. "Donate it, burn it, I don't care. But you're walking out of here with your head up, not because I rescued you, but because you deserve better than this circus." Alara stared at him. Her hands had stopped shaking. "Who are you?" Something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile. "Someone who appreciates people who save lives for a living. Someone who hates bullies. Take your pick." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not." He extended his hand toward her, not to shake, to help her down from the platform. Alara looked at his hand, at the scars across his knuckles, at the expensive watch on his wrist that probably cost more than her annual salary. Then she stepped around him and walked down the stairs on her own. The crowd parted again. Nobody laughed now. Nobody spoke. They just watched as Alara Wren, trauma nurse from Queens, walked through their expensive silence in her borrowed dress and cheap shoes, head high, hands steady. She made it to the coat check before her knees started shaking. The attendant, a college-age girl with a pixie cut, handed over Alara's jacket without being asked, her eyes wide. "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen," she whispered. "I didn't do anything," Alara said. "Yeah, you did. You didn't take his hand." The girl glanced toward the ballroom. "Do you know who that was?" "No, Darian Volkov." The girl said the name like it should mean something. When Alara's expression didn't change, she added, "He owns half of Brooklyn, maybe more. People don't say no to him, ever." Alara's hands fumbled with her jacket zipper. "Well, I just did." She walked out into the October night, where the air was cold enough to hurt her lungs, and the streetlights threw orange shadows across the manicured Greenwich lawns. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, probably Margaret, demanding an update, but Alara ignored it. She'd walked 2 blocks before she realized she had no idea how to get back to Queens from here. The cab she'd taken had cost $40 one way, and she had maybe 20 in cash. "Miss Wren!" Alara spun around. Darian Volkov stood 10 feet behind her, hands in his pockets, looking like he'd materialized out of the shadows themselves. "Jesus Christ!" Alara pressed a hand to her chest. "Do you always follow women into dark streets?" "Only when they're about to walk 3 miles to the nearest train station in heels." He nodded at her feet. "Those are going to destroy your ankles." "I'm a nurse. I've worked 12-hour shifts and worse." "I'm sure you have." He pulled something from his pocket, a phone, and made a call. Spoke in rapid Russian to whoever answered, then hung up. "My driver will take you home." "I don't need but—" "I know. You don't need saving. You've made that clear." He met her eyes. "But you do need a ride, and I have a car that's going to sit idle all night if you don't use it. Humor me." Alara wanted to say no. Every instinct she'd developed surviving New York told her not to get into cars with strange men, especially strange men who threw around $100,000 payments like cab fare. But her feet hurt, and she was exhausted, and something about the way he stood there, patient, unbothered, like he had all night to wait for her decision, made her think he wasn't going to push. "Fine," she said, "but just a ride. Nothing else." "Nothing else," he agreed. A black sedan pulled up to the curb 30 seconds later. The driver got out, opened the back door, and stood at attention like this was a military operation. Alara slid into the leather interior, and Darian closed the door behind her. Through the tinted window, she watched him step back onto the sidewalk. She rolled down the window. "You're not coming?" "No." "Why not?" He smiled then. Actually smiled, and it changed his whole face, made him look younger, less dangerous, almost human. "Because you told me you don't need saving," he said, "and I believe you." The car pulled away before Alara could respond. She didn't hear from him for 3 days. Alara worked her regular shifts, 2 12-hour rotations in the trauma ward, 1 in the ER, and tried not to think about Greenwich or charity auctions or men who paid obscene amounts of money to prove a point. It didn't work. On Tuesday night, she came home from a particularly brutal shift, 2 stabbings, a car accident, and a coding patient she'd lost despite 40 minutes of compressions, to find a bag hanging on her apartment door. Not a plastic bodega bag, a real bag, the kind with handles and a bakery logo stamped on thick paper. Inside, still warm soup, fresh bread, and a small white card that read, "You forget to eat after hard shifts. No signature." Alara stood in her narrow hallway, holding the bag, and felt something uncomfortable twist in her chest. She threw the card away, ate the soup, told herself it was a one-time thing. On Thursday, there was another bag, this time with pasta, salad, and a container of tiramisu that tasted like it came from the Italian place on Smith Street that she'd never been able to afford. On Saturday, she came out of Queens General after a double shift to find a black sedan idling by the ambulance bay. The same driver from Greenwich got out, opened the back door, and said, "Mr. Volkov thought you might need a ride." "Mr. Volkov can think again," Alara said. But she was so tired her bones ached, and the train ride home was 45 minutes of standing room only, and the driver looked like he'd wait all night if necessary. She got in the car. The apartment building where she lived was a pre-war walk-up in Astoria with a broken buzzer and radiators that clanged like church bells. Alara had lived there for 6 years, ever since nursing school, and she'd learned to love its quirks. The way Mrs. Chen on the second floor always left dumplings by her door on Sundays. The way the super, Eddie, fixed things with duct tape and prayer. The way her neighbor's cat, Pancake, would slip through her fire escape window and sleep on her couch. She climbed the 4 flights to her apartment, unlocked 3 separate locks, and stepped inside. Then stopped. Her radiator was working. Not clanging, not leaking. Actually producing heat for the first time since March. Alara walked over and touched it. Warm, steady, fixed. She checked the hallway. No sign of Eddie. No note. She texted him. "Did you fix my radiator?" His response came 2 minutes later. "What radiator? Your radiator's been broken for months. Why is it working now?" Alara sat down on her couch. Pancake jumped up next to her, purring, oblivious to the fact that her entire life was starting to feel like a suspense novel she hadn't signed up for. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered it. "If this is Darian Volkov, we need to have a conversation about boundaries." A pause. Then that low, accented voice. "Is that a yes to dinner tomorrow night?" "That's a, how did you fix my radiator without breaking into my apartment?" "I didn't break in. I hired a licensed contractor who accessed the building's heating system with the landlord's permission. Everything was legal." "That's not reassuring." "Wasn't meant to be reassuring. It was meant to be warm." Another pause. "Dinner. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. There's a place in Brooklyn I think you'd like." Alara closed her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you saved my life," Darian said quietly. "And you don't remember." The line went dead. Alara sat there for a long time, Pancake purring against her leg, the radiator humming steadily in the corner. Then she called him back. He answered on the first ring. "When?" Alara asked. 4 years ago, December. You were working night shift at Queen's General." "I've worked hundreds of night shifts. You'll need to be more specific." "It was raining. I was shot twice. Once in the shoulder, once in the chest, just below the collarbone. I made it half a block before I collapsed on the sidewalk near Steinway Street. You found me, kept pressure on the wounds for 23 minutes until the ambulance arrived. Then you disappeared before my men showed up." Alara's heart was pounding now. "How do you know it was me?" "Your hands," Darian said. "At the auction, when you were standing on that platform, you clasped them behind your back. Your right thumb was rubbing circles on your left wrist. You did the same thing that night on the sidewalk while you were keeping me alive. Small movements. Unconscious. I've never seen anyone else do it exactly that way." Alara looked down at her hands. She was doing it now, right thumb circling her left wrist, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. "I don't remember you," she whispered. "I know. There were a lot of patients that night. Trauma ward was slammed, multi-car pileup on the BQE, 2 gang shootings, a structure fire. I was just another bleeding body." His voice softened. "But I remembered you. I've been looking for you for 4 years. Why? Because you're the only person who ever saved my life without asking what I could give you in return." A pause. "And because I need to know if you're real, or if I imagined the only good thing that ever happened to me." Alara's hands were shaking again. "Dinner, tomorrow, 7. I'll send a car." "No." She surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. "Tell me where's what, and I'll meet you there." Darian laughed, a short, rough sound. "You really don't like being saved, do you?" "I'm a trauma nurse. I do the saving." "Fair enough." He gave her an address in Brooklyn. 7 p.m. Don't be late. He hung up before she could change her mind. The restaurant was a small Italian place tucked between a laundromat and a bodega in Red Hook, the kind of neighborhood where you could still find rent-controlled apartments and old men playing chess on milk crates. Alara arrived at 7:15, late on purpose because she wasn't going to let him think she was eager, and found Darian sitting at a corner table with a glass of red wine and a patience that suggested he'd have waited all night. He stood when she approached, old-fashioned manners that felt strange in 2024. "You came," he said. "You fixed my radiator. Seemed rude not to." He smiled. "Sit, please." The owner, a tiny Italian woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, appeared with menus and water, firing off the specials in rapid Italian. Darian answered in the same language, and the woman laughed, patted his cheek like he was a grandson, and disappeared into the kitchen. Alara raised an eyebrow. "You speak Italian?" Russian, Italian, English, and enough Arabic to get by. You pick things up when you travel, or when you run an empire. Alara set down her menu. The coat check girl told me who you are. And you came anyway. I came because you said I saved your life, and I wanted to know if you were lying. I don't lie, Darian said. Everyone lies. Not to you, not about this. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. What do you want to know? Everything. Alara met his eyes. Starting with why a man who owns half of Brooklyn was bleeding out on a sidewalk in Queens 4 years ago. Darian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. The relaxed ease disappeared, replaced by the same coiled tension she'd seen at the auction. I was making a deal that went bad, he said quietly. Someone decided they wanted a larger cut, shot me twice, took the money, left me to die. I made it to the car, told my driver to head for the nearest hospital, but I passed out before we got there. Woke up on the sidewalk with your hands on my chest and rain in my eyes. What happened to the person who shot you? I killed him. Alara's breath caught. Not because she was shocked. She'd worked in trauma long enough to know what the people who came through her doors were capable of, but because he'd said it so simply, like it was a fact, not a confession. You're not going to ask if I regret it, Darian observed. Would you? No. Then why would I ask? Alara picked up her water glass. I'm not here to judge your life. I'm here to understand why you've been following me. I haven't been following you. I've been protecting you. From what? From people like me. The owner returned with bread and olive oil. Darian waited until she left before continuing. When you saved my life, you became visible, he said. To me, yes. But also to anyone watching me. Anyone who might want leverage. Anyone who might think you matter. I'm a trauma nurse. I don't matter to anyone except my patients. You matter to me. The words hung between them like a challenge. Alara set down her glass. You don't know me. I know you work doubles when the ward is short-staffed. I know you eat lunch at your desk because you don't want to miss a patient who might code. I know you take the train home even when you're exhausted because you can't justify the cost of a cab. I know your radiator's been broken since March, and your landlord hasn't fixed it because he's waiting for enough tenants to complain that it becomes a building-wide issue. Darian's voice was soft, relentless. I know you forget to eat after hard shifts. I know you live alone except for a cat that isn't yours. I know you haven't been to the Italian place on Smith Street because it's $8 more than you budget for meals. Alara's hands were shaking. She hid them under the table. That's not knowing me, she said. That's stalking. You're right. Darian didn't look away. And I'm not going to apologize because keeping you safe has been the only thing that's mattered to me for 4 years. But I'll stop if you tell me to. Say the word, and I'll walk out of here. You'll never see me again. No more cars, no more food, no more fixed radiators. I'll disappear. Alara wanted to say yes. Wanted to tell this dangerous stranger to get out of her life and stay out. But she didn't. Because sitting across from Darian Volkov, watching the way candlelight caught the scar above his eyebrow, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want him to disappear. She wanted to understand him. Tell me about that night, she said instead. Tell me what you remember. So he did. He told her about the rain, cold enough to numb his fingers, about the pain in his chest, sharp and expanding like a balloon filling with broken glass, about the sidewalk, wet and gritty under his cheek, about the sound of his own breathing, ragged and failing, and then about her, about hands pressing down on his wounds, firm, steady, unshakable, about a voice telling him to stay awake, to keep his eyes open, to hold on just a little longer, about the way she'd counted compressions out loud, not for him, but for herself, like she needed to hear the rhythm to believe it was working. You told me your name, Darian said, but I was losing consciousness and I couldn't hold on to it. By the time I woke up in the hospital, you were gone. I asked everyone, nurses, doctors, EMTs. No one remembered a woman matching your description. It was like you'd never existed. I probably left before the ambulance arrived, Alara said. Her throat was tight. We're not supposed to stay. Good Samaritan laws protect us legally, but hospitals don't like complications. Better to help and disappear than get tangled in police reports. I know. That's why I couldn't find you. Darian's jaw tightened. I searched for 4 years, checked every hospital in Queens, ran facial recognition on security footage. Nothing. You were a ghost. Until the auction. Until the auction. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Alara saw something in his eyes that made her chest ache. Gratitude, yes, but also something raw, desperation. I recognized you the moment you stepped onto that platform. The way you held your hands, the way you stood, like you were bracing for impact. I knew it was you. Alara's vision blurred. She blinked hard. So you paid $100,000? I'd have paid more. Darian's voice dropped. I'd have burned that entire ballroom to the ground if it meant you walked out of there with your dignity intact. The food arrived, pasta, wine, salad, but neither of them touched it. What do you want from me? Alara asked. Nothing. Liar. Darian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I want you to let me keep you safe. That's all. You saved my life. Let me return the favor. I don't need protection. Everyone needs protection. You just haven't realized it yet. Alara stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor. I need air. She walked outside into the October cold and leaned against the brick wall. Her hands were shaking again. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. Darian followed her out. Didn't touch her, just stood there, solid and silent. This is insane, Alara said. Yes. You're a criminal. Yes. I should walk away right now and never look back. Yes, Darian agreed. You should. Alara looked at him, at the scar on his eyebrow, at the burn mark on his hand, at the way he stood like a man who'd spent his whole life expecting betrayal. But you won't stop me if I do, she said. No, I won't stop you. You'll just let me go, if that's what you want. Alara closed her eyes, thought about the radiator, the food, the car rides, the way he'd stood up in that ballroom and made 300 people remember what shame felt like. I don't know what I want, she whispered. Darian stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his body. Then let me make this simple, he said. I'm not asking for your love. I'm not asking for your trust. I'm not even asking for your time. I'm just asking you to let me exist in your orbit. Let me fix things when they break. Let me make sure you eat. Let me be the reason you don't have to look over your shoulder. Why? Because 4 years ago you gave me something no one else ever has. His voice cracked, just slightly. You gave me a reason to believe that good people still exist, and I need you to keep existing, Alara, even if it's nowhere near me. Alara opened her eyes. Darian was looking at her like she was the only real thing in a world made of smoke and mirrors, and Alara realized with a clarity that felt like falling that she was in serious trouble. 1 dinner a week, she heard herself say. That's it. No cars, no food deliveries, no fixing things in my apartment without asking. If we're doing this, we're doing it like normal people. Darian's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Relief, maybe, or hope. Normal people, he repeated. Yes, you pick a place, I show up, we eat, we talk, that's all. And if I want more, then you wait until I'm ready to give it. Alara straightened, and you tell me the truth about everything. No more watching from the shadows. No more secrets. Darian was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Alara looked at it, at the scars, at the expensive watch, at the man who'd paid $100,000 for her dignity and asked for nothing in return. She took his hand. His grip was warm, careful, like he was afraid she'd break. 1 dinner a week, he agreed. They went back inside, ate their pasta, talked about small things, her work, his travel, the weather. Normal conversation. Safe. But when Darian walked her to the train station at the end of the night and she turned to say goodbye, she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her breath stop. Like she was something precious, something worth protecting, something he'd searched 4 years to find. Good night, Alara, he said. Good night. She walked down into the subway station, swiped her Metro card, and sat on the train as it rattled toward Queens. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for letting me find you again. Alara stared at the message for 3 stops. Then she saved the number under a single name. Darian. And she knew, with the same instinct that told her when a patient was about to crash, that her life would never be the same. The dinners became a ritual. Every Thursday night, 7 p.m., a different restaurant each time. Darian never picked the expensive places. No Michelin stars, no velvet ropes, no waiters in bow ties. Instead, he chose small family-owned spots tucked into Brooklyn corners, where the owners knew his name and didn't ask questions. Thai places with plastic chairs and curry that burned her throat. Greek diners where the baklava came with thick coffee and the owner's life story. A Dominican restaurant where the music was too loud and the mofongo made Alara close her eyes and forget, just for a moment, that she was sitting across from a man who'd admitted to murder like it was a weather report. 3 weeks in, Alara realized she was looking forward to Thursdays more than she wanted to admit. She told herself it was just the food, just the break from hospital cafeteria sandwiches and the protein bars she ate standing up between traumas, just the novelty of conversation with someone who didn't smell like antiseptic and exhaustion. But that was a lie, and she knew it. It was the way Darian listened, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to talk. The way he'd ask about her patients, not their names, he understood HIPAA, but their stories. The grandmother with the heart attack who'd refused treatment until her grandson arrived. The construction worker with the crushed hand who'd joked through the pain because his daughter was watching. The teenager who'd coded twice and came back fighting. Darian absorbed every word like he was memorizing scripture. And he never, not once, looked at his phone. "You're staring," Alara said one Thursday night in early November. They were in a Vietnamese place in Sunset Park, and she'd just finished telling him about a 12-hour surgery she'd assisted on. A motorcycle accident, internal bleeding, odds so bad the attending had almost called it. "I'm listening," Darian corrected. "You can listen without staring." "Not at you." He picked up his tea. "You talk with your hands when you're excited. Did you know that?" Alara looked down. Her hands were hovering over the table, fingers splayed like she was still demonstrating the surgical approach. She dropped them into her lap. "Don't," Darian said quietly. "I like it. You're alive when you talk about your work. The rest of the time you look like you're bracing for impact. That's what working in trauma does to you." "No, that's what the world does to you." He set down his tea. "The trauma ward just makes it harder to pretend otherwise." Alara wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because he was right. She'd learned a long time ago that terrible things happened without warning, that bodies failed, that people died on gurneys while their families waited for news that would shatter them. The trauma ward hadn't taught her that. Life had. The ward just forced her to witness it in high definition. "You're doing it again," she said. "What?" "Seeing too much." Darian smiled, but it was sad. "I spent 4 years wondering if you were real. Now that I've found you, I'm trying to memorize every detail before you disappear again. I'm not going anywhere. Everyone goes somewhere eventually." He leaned back in his chair. "But I'll take what I can get." They finished dinner, walked outside into the November cold. Darian's car was waiting. He'd stopped pretending he took the train, but he didn't move toward it. "Come with me," he said. Alara's guard went up instantly. "Where?" "Somewhere I want to show you. 10 minutes. If you hate it, I'll take you home." That's what serial killers say. Serial killers don't usually announce their body count over pasta. Darian's expression was serious, but there was a glint in his eyes. "Trust me, just this once." Alara knew she shouldn't. Knew that getting into a car with a man who'd killed someone, probably multiple someones, was exactly the kind of decision that ended badly in true crime podcasts. But she got in anyway. They drove through Brooklyn in silence. The streets blurred past. Warehouses, brownstones, bodegas with flickering neon signs. Darian's driver navigated with the practiced ease of someone who'd made this route 1,000 times. They stopped in Red Hook in front of a converted warehouse with industrial windows and no visible signage. "This is your place?" Alara asked. "One of them." Darian led her inside. The first floor was empty except for a vintage motorcycle and some moving boxes. But when they climbed the steel staircase to the second floor, Alara stopped breathing. The entire space was open. 30-foot ceilings, exposed brick, windows overlooking the harbor. But that wasn't what made her chest tight. It was the books. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, packed with hardcovers and paperbacks in a dozen languages. Not decorative books chosen by an interior designer. Real books, worn and dog-eared, with cracked spines and notes in the margins. "You read?" Alara said stupidly. "Is that surprising?" "Yes." She walked to the nearest shelf, running her fingers along the spines. Russian literature, American classics, medical textbooks, history, philosophy. I thought you'd have, I don't know, gun catalogs, money laundering spreadsheets. Darian laughed, a real laugh, not the controlled sound he usually made. I have those too. Different shelf. Alara pulled out a battered copy of the Brothers Karamazov. The margins were filled with notes in Russian. I read that after I got shot, Darian said. Spent 3 weeks in a safe house recovering. Had nothing to do but read and remember what it felt like when your hands were on my chest. Alara's throat tightened. She put the book back. Why did you bring me here? Because you think I'm a monster, and you're not wrong. But I wanted you to see that monsters still read Dostoevsky, still wonder about mercy and redemption, still hope that somewhere, somehow, there's a version of themselves that made better choices. He moved to the window. The harbor lights reflected in the glass, turning his profile into something almost beautiful. I've done things you can't forgive, Darian continued. I've hurt people, killed people, built an empire on violence and fear. But 4 years ago on that sidewalk, you treated me like I was worth saving, like my life mattered, and I've been trying to figure out why ever since. Because I'm a nurse, Alara said. It's what I do. No. Darian turned to face her. You saved me because you're good. Not naive, not stupid, good. And I'm so fucking terrified that the longer you're around me, the more you'll realize that I'm going to ruin that goodness just by existing near it. Alara's heart was pounding. She should leave, should walk out of this warehouse and never come back. Instead, she crossed the room and stood in front of him. You want to know why I saved you? She asked. It wasn't because you're good. It was because you were dying, and I don't let people die if I can help it. That's not kindness. That's arrogance. I decided your life was worth more than your choices, and I forced you to keep living. Forced me, Darian repeated. Yes. You didn't ask for my help. I gave it anyway. So if you've spent 4 years wondering why, here's your answer. I'm just as much of a monster as you are. I just wear scrubs instead of a suit. Darian stared at her. Then he started laughing, deep, helpless laughter that shook his shoulders and made him lean against the window for support. What? Alara demanded. You. He wiped his eyes. You just compared trauma nursing to organized crime. They're both about controlling chaos. Alara, you save lives. I end them. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? She stepped closer. You think I haven't made choices that got people killed? Every time I prioritize one patient over another in triage, someone dies. Every time I call a code and decide how long to run it, I'm playing God. I just get to feel righteous about it because there's a hospital and a paycheck involved. Darian's laughter died. That's not the same. It's close enough that I lost sleep over it for the first 3 years. Alara's voice cracked. So don't put me on a pedestal, Darian. Don't make me into some symbol of goodness that you're going to corrupt. I'm just a person who's scared all the time and trying not to show it. Scared of what? Of this. She gestured between them. Of whatever this is. Of the fact that I shouldn't want to be here, but I do. Of the fact that when you look at me, I feel less invisible than I've felt in years. The words hung between them like a confession. Darian moved first. Not toward her, away. He walked to the far side of the room and braced his hands against a bookshelf like it was the only thing keeping him upright. You should go, he said. What? You should leave. Now, before I do something we'll both regret. Alara's chest hurt. Like what? Like tell you that I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night. Like admit that every Thursday I count the hours until 7 p.m. Like confess that when you talk about your patients, I imagine what it would be like if you cared about me the way you care about them. Like I'm worth saving even when the odds are shit. His voice was raw, stripped of every defense. Alara couldn't breathe. Darian, I'm in love with you, he said. I've been in love with you since you told me to keep my eyes open on that sidewalk. And it's the most selfish thing I've ever felt, because you deserve someone who doesn't have blood on his hands and enemies lining up to hurt anyone he cares about. So please, go. Before I ask you to stay. Alara's legs wouldn't move. Her brain was screaming at her to run, to get out before this went somewhere she couldn't come back from. But her heart, her stupid, traitorous heart, was telling her something else entirely. What if I don't want to go? She whispered. Darian turned around. His eyes were dark, desperate. Then you're making a mistake. I make mistakes all the time. I'm a trauma nurse. We're built for it. Elara, she crossed the room before he could finish, stood close enough to feel the heat coming off his body, close enough to see the scar above his eyebrow and the way his jaw clenched like he was fighting himself. Ask me to stay, she said. I can't. Why not? Because if I ask, you'll say yes. And if you say yes, I won't let you go. Ever. Elara reached up and touched his face. His skin was warm, rough with stubble. He flinched like she'd burned him. Then don't let go, she said. Darian made a sound low in his throat, half groan, half surrender, and kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was 4 years of searching and wanting and needing compressed into a single moment. His hands came up to frame her face, and Elara felt herself falling into him like gravity had shifted, and he was the only solid thing left. She kissed him back just as hard, grabbed his shirt, let herself feel all the things she'd been pushing down for weeks, the attraction, the fear, the desperate longing to be seen by someone who understood what it meant to live in the space between life and death. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Darian rested his forehead against hers. This is a mistake, he said. Probably. You're going to regret it. Maybe. Elara's hands were still fisted in his shirt. But I'm tired of being safe. I'm tired of going home to an empty apartment and pretending I'm fine. I'm tired of saving everyone else and having no one save me. I can't save you, Elara. I can only destroy things. Then destroy me. She looked up at him. Just do it honestly. Darian's control shattered. He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation. Just heat and hunger and the overwhelming relief of finally giving in. They stayed in the warehouse until midnight, talked and kissed and talked some more. Darian showed her the view from the roof. The harbor stretched out like black glass, Brooklyn glittering in the distance. Elara told him about her childhood in a small town upstate, about the first person who died in her arms during clinical rotations, about the way she'd learned to compartmentalize grief so she could function. Darian told her about growing up in Moscow, about coming to New York at 19 with nothing, about building something from violence and necessity and the kind of desperation that makes people dangerous. I'm not a good man, he said at one point. I know. But I'll be good to you. I swear it. Elara believed him. That was the first mistake. The second mistake was thinking they could keep it quiet. For 3 weeks they managed. Thursday dinners stretched into Friday mornings. Elara started keeping a toothbrush at the warehouse. Darian learned her hospital schedule and had food delivered on nights she worked late. They were careful. No public displays, no social media, no letting anyone in either of their worlds know that they'd become a they. But secrets have a way of leaking. Elara noticed it first. Small things. The way one of the ER attendings looked at her during rounds, like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. The way her supervisor, Margaret, asked pointed questions about her plans for Thanksgiving. The way the security guard at the hospital entrance started calling her Miss Wren instead of just Elara. Then the car started following her. Black tinted windows. Always 3 cars back, never close enough to be obvious. But Elara had grown up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and she'd developed a sixth sense for being watched. She noticed it on a Tuesday afternoon, again on Wednesday morning. By Thursday, she was sure. She didn't tell Darian. Not yet. Because part of her wondered if she was being paranoid, if working in trauma had finally broken her pattern, recognition software, and made her see threats where none existed. But on Friday night, when she left the hospital at 11 p.m. after a brutal shift, the sedan was waiting across the street. Elara's phone buzzed. A text from Darian. Are you still at work? She typed back, just leaving. See you tomorrow? His response came immediately. Stay inside. I'm sending a car. Elara looked up. The black sedan was still there. Another text. Do not leave the building until my driver arrives. Please, Elara. Her heart started pounding. She walked back inside the hospital, through the sliding doors, and stood in the lobby with her phone clutched in her hand. 5 minutes later, a different car pulled up, the one she recognized, with Darian's usual driver. He got out, scanned the street, then walked into the lobby. Miss Wren, he said quietly, His name was Victor, and he had driven her home a dozen times without ever asking personal questions. Mr. Volkov asked me to make sure you get home safely. There's a car across the street, Alara said. Victor's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. I know. Ignore it. Come with me. He walked her to the car, one hand hovering near the small of her back, not touching, but ready. They got in. Victor pulled away from the curb smoothly, professionally. The black sedan followed them. Alara's hands were shaking. What's happening? Victor's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Mr. Volkov will explain. They didn't go to her apartment. They went to the warehouse in Red Hook. Darian was waiting outside, and the moment he saw her, something in his face cracked. He yanked open the car door before Victor had fully stopped. Are you hurt? His hands were on her face, her shoulders, checking for damage. I'm fine. Darian, what? Inside. Now. He pulled her into the warehouse, up the stairs, into the open space with the books and the windows. Victor followed, along with two other men Alara didn't recognize. Darian rounded on Victor. Who? Serrano's people, Victor said. Black Mercedes, registered to a shell company we traced back to his Brooklyn operations. They've been on her for 4 days. Alara's blood went cold. Who's Serrano? Darian didn't answer. He was pacing now, hands flexed like he wanted to hit something. How did he find out? We're not sure, Victor said. But he knows she matters to you. Darian. Alara's voice cut through the room. Who is Serrano? He stopped pacing, looked at her with an expression that made her stomach drop. A rival, he said. Someone who's been trying to move into my territory for 6 months. Someone who's smart enough to know that the best way to hurt me isn't through violence or money. It's through leverage. And I'm leverage. You're everything. Darian's jaw clenched, which means he's going to come for you. Alara's legs felt weak. She sat down on the couch. What does that mean? What does come for me mean? It means he'll try to take you, use you to negotiate, or... Darian's voice broke. Or hurt you to prove a point. So what am I supposed to do? Quit my job? Hide? Yes. Absolutely not. Alara stood up. I'm not hiding from some gangster because you pissed him off. This isn't about what you want, Alara. This is about keeping you alive. Then you should have thought about that before you fell in love with me. The words ripped out of her, sharp and accusing. You knew this could happen. You said it yourself. People like you make anyone near them a target. But you pursued me anyway. You fixed my radiator and sent me food and made me feel like I mattered. And now I'm in danger because you were selfish. Darian flinched like she'd hit him. You're right. Don't. Alara's hands were shaking. Don't agree with me. Fight back. Tell me I'm wrong. I can't because you're not. He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, Darian Volkov looked defeated. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. I know. Alara wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to rewind 3 months and walk away from that charity auction and never look back. But she couldn't. Because even now, even terrified and angry, part of her wanted to close the distance between them and tell him it would be okay. What do we do? She asked instead. We end this, Darian said. I end this. How? I'm going to meet with Serrano. Make him understand that touching you isn't an option. And if he doesn't listen, Darian's eyes went flat. Then I'll make sure he can't touch anyone ever again. Alara's stomach turned. You're talking about killing him. I'm talking about protecting you. That's not the same thing. In my world, it is. They stared at each other across the warehouse. Two people who'd found each other in the dark and were now realizing that the light might burn them both alive. Victor cleared his throat. Boss, we should move her. Safe house. No, Alara said. Alara. I said no. She looked at Darian. I'm not going into hiding. I have patients who need me, a life. You don't get to put me in a box because you're scared. I'm not scared. I'm realistic. Then be realistic about this. I'm not your property. You don't get to decide what happens to me. Darian's hands flexed. Fine. Then I'll put security on you everywhere you go. Victor will drive you to work. Men will watch your building. You won't be alone for a second until Serrano is handled. That's insane. That's necessary. His voice dropped. Please, Alara, let me keep you safe. It's the only thing I know how to do. Alara wanted to say no, wanted to prove she didn't need him, didn't need anyone. But the truth was, she was terrified. "Fine," she said, "but I'm still going to work. I'm still living my life. And when this is over, we're going to have a serious conversation about whether this," she gestured between them, "is actually worth it." Darian's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes died a little. "Understood," he said. Whoa. The next 72 hours were a nightmare. Victor drove Alara to and from the hospital. 2 men she didn't know stood in the lobby of her building. Another followed her on the subway when she insisted on taking it to prove a point. Her phone buzzed constantly with texts from Darian, checking in, asking if she was okay, apologizing for things he couldn't fix. She stopped answering after the first day. At work, she threw herself into her shifts. A homeless man with pneumonia, a teenager with a broken jaw from a fight, a woman who'd overdosed in a McDonald's bathroom and came back swinging after Narcan. Alara stitched and stabilized and saved, and tried not to think about the fact that her life had become a crime thriller she hadn't auditioned for. Margaret cornered her on day 3. "You look like hell," Margaret said bluntly. They were in the break room and Alara was trying to choke down hospital coffee. "What's going on?" "Nothing." "Liar. You've got security following you around like you're a head of state. Who pissed off?" "No one." Margaret studied her. "Is it a man?" Alara's silence was answer enough. "Jesus, Alara, what kind of man needs armed guards?" "The kind you don't ask questions about." Margaret sat down across from her. "Look, I don't know what you're mixed up in, and I'm not going to lecture you. You're a grown woman. But I've worked in this hospital for 20 years, and I've seen what happens when good people get tangled up with bad ones. It never ends well." "I know." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're about to throw away your career for someone who's going to get you killed." Alara looked up sharply. "You don't know him. I don't need to. I've seen enough men like him come through our trauma bay. They all think they're protecting someone. They're all convinced they're doing the right thing, and they all end up bleeding out on our tables while we try to explain to their families why they're never going home." Alara's hands started shaking. She set down her coffee before she spilled it. "I have to go," she said. "Alara?" But she was already walking away. She made it to the bathroom before the panic attack hit, locked herself in a stall, pressed her forehead against the cool metal door and tried to remember how to breathe. Margaret was right. She knew Margaret was right, but she couldn't walk away. Not yet. Not when Darian was trying to fix this. Not when there was still a chance they could. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Alara's blood went cold. She answered it. "Hello?" Silence. Then a man's voice, smooth and amused. "Miss Wren, we haven't been properly introduced." Alara's chest tightened. "Who is this?" "A friend. Or an enemy, depending on how this conversation goes." The voice had a faint accent. Italian, maybe. "I understand you've been seeing Darian Volkov." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please, don't insult my intelligence. I've had people watching you for a week. I know where you live, where you work, what time you leave the hospital, what you eat for breakfast." Alara's vision blurred. "What do you want?" "I want you to deliver a message." The voice hardened. "Tell Darian that his protection only works if you're with him. The moment you're alone, and you will be alone eventually, you're mine. And when I take you, I'm going to make sure he knows exactly how much you suffered before you died." The line went dead. Alara dropped her phone. It clattered against the tile floor. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't... The bathroom door opened. Footsteps. "Alara?" Margaret's voice. "You okay?" Alara unlocked the stall with shaking hands and walked out. Margaret took one look at her face and grabbed her shoulders. "What happened?" "I need to leave." "You just started your shift." "I need to leave. Now." She didn't wait for permission, just grabbed her bag from her locker and walked out of Queen's General with Victor falling into step beside her like a shadow. They drove to the warehouse in silence. Darian was waiting in the main room, along with Victor and 4 other men Alara didn't recognize. They were standing around a table covered in photographs and documents. He looked up when she walked in, took one look at her face, and crossed the room in 3 strides. "What happened?" Alara pulled out her phone, showed him the call log. "He called me. Serrano. He knows where I live, where I work. He said..." Her voice cracked. He said when he takes me, he's going to make sure you know how much I suffered. Darian's expression went blank. Not angry, not scared. Blank. Like he'd shut down every emotion and turned into something mechanical. Victor, he said quietly, get her out of here. What? No. Alara grabbed his arm. I'm not leaving. Yes, you are. Now. Darian. He turned to face her and Alara saw something in his eyes that made her breath stop. Rage. Pure, controlled, incandescent rage. He threatened you, Darian said softly. He called you, spoke to you, made you afraid. That's not a negotiation. That's a declaration of war. So what are you going to do? What I should have done the moment I realized he knew about you. Darian's jaw clenched. I'm going to kill him. You can't just. I can. And I will. He cupped her face in his hands. But I need you somewhere safe first. Please. Let Victor take you to the safe house. Let me handle this. And then what? I just wait while you commit murder? Yes. That's insane. That's the only way this ends, Alara. Him or you. And I'm choosing you. His voice broke. I will always choose you. Alara's eyes burned. She wanted to argue, wanted to find another solution, but she couldn't, because deep down she knew he was right. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Darian kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her mouth, soft and desperate. I love you, he said. I know. Victor led her toward the door. Alara looked back once, saw Darian standing in the center of the room, surrounded by men who looked at him like he was a general preparing for battle. And she realized, with a clarity that felt like breaking, that she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She'd become exactly what Serrano wanted. Leverage. The safe house was a third-floor apartment in Bay Ridge that smelled like old cigarettes and disinfectant. Victor led Alara inside, checked every room with military precision, then stationed himself by the door like a stone statue. How long? Alara asked. Her voice sounded hollow in the empty space. Until it's done, Victor said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Alara walked to the window. The glass was reinforced. She could tell by the thickness and the way the streetlight refracted through it. Bulletproof, probably. She pressed her palm against it and felt the cold seep into her skin. Somewhere out there, Darian was preparing to kill a man. For her. Because she'd been stupid enough to fall in love with someone whose world operated on rules she didn't understand. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it, hoping for Darian. It was Margaret. 3 missed calls, 2 texts. Where are you? And we need to talk. Call me. Alara silenced her phone and shoved it in her pocket. The hours crawled. Victor stood by the door, immovable. Alara paced, sat on the couch, paced again. Her mind kept circling back to that phone call, Serrano's voice, smooth and confident, describing exactly how he'd hurt her. Make sure he knows how much you suffered. She'd dealt with threats before. Angry family members in the ER. Patients high on meth who swung at nurses. Drunk men who followed her to the subway. But those threats were immediate, physical. This was different. This was calculated. A chess move designed to break Darian from the inside out. And it was working. At midnight, Victor's phone rang. He answered in Russian, listened, then hung up. It's done, he said. Alara's stomach dropped. What's done? The meeting. Boss is on his way. Is he hurt? Victor's expression didn't change. No. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by something darker. Darian wasn't hurt, which meant someone else was. Probably dead. She sat down on the couch and waited. 20 minutes later, the door opened. Darian walked in, and Alara's breath caught. He looked exactly the same. Same black suit, same careful posture. No blood, no visible damage. But his eyes were different, flat and cold, like he'd locked something away and thrown out the key. It's over, he said. Serrano? Won't be a problem anymore. Alara stood up. Her legs felt unsteady. What did you do? What needed to be done? Darian's voice was clipped, professional. You're safe now. That's all that matters. Don't do that. Don't shut me out. I'm not shutting you out. I'm protecting you from details you don't need. I don't need protection from the truth, Darian. I need you to be honest with me. He was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed and rubbed his face with both hands. When he looked at her again, some of the coldness had cracked. We met in a warehouse in Greenpoint, he said quietly. Neutral territory. I brought 4 men. He brought 6. We talked. About what? About why touching you was the last mistake he was ever going to make. About how I've spent 4 years building something in this city, and he thought he could waltz in and take it because I'd gone soft. Darian's jaw clenched. I explained that soft was a misinterpretation, that protecting someone I love doesn't make me weak. It makes me exponentially more dangerous. Ilara's hands were shaking. She clasped them behind her back. And then? And then he laughed. Said I'd already lost because now he knew exactly how to hurt me. Said he'd take you apart piece by piece, film it, send it to me in installments. Darian's voice went flat again. So I shot him. The words landed like stones in water. You shot him, Ilara repeated. Yes. In front of his men. Yes. And they just let you? No. They drew weapons. My men drew weapons. It was a standoff for about 30 seconds. Then Serrano's second-in-command, a man named Luca, put his gun down. Said Serrano had gotten sloppy, greedy, that threatening you was amateur hour and he was tired of cleaning up his boss's mistakes. Darian's expression was grim. So we made a deal. Luca takes over Serrano's operations. I get the ports I wanted. And you never hear that name again. Ilara's vision blurred. You killed him. I did. And you're just fine with that? No. Darian's voice cracked. I'm not fine. But I'd do it again. 1,000 times. Because the alternative was letting him hurt you, and that's not something I can live with. Ilara wanted to scream, wanted to cry, wanted to rewind time and go back to 3 months ago when her biggest problem was a broken radiator and a job that exhausted her. Instead, she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. Darian stiffened. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against his chest like he was afraid she'd disappear. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry. I know. They stood there for a long time, holding each other in a safe house that smelled like cigarettes and regret. 2 days later, Ilara went back to work. Darian had argued. Victor had argued. Even Margaret, who'd somehow gotten wind of the situation through hospital gossip, had called and told her to take time off. But Ilara couldn't. Because if she stayed away from the hospital, stayed locked in that apartment, she'd go insane thinking about Serrano's body in a Greenpoint warehouse and the way Darian had described shooting him like it was a business transaction. So she showered, put on scrubs, took Victor's car to Queens General, and walked into the trauma ward like nothing had happened. Margaret was waiting by the nurse's station. My office, she said. Now. They walked past the supply closet, past the break room, into Margaret's cramped office that smelled like coffee and antiseptic. Margaret closed the door and leaned against it. Talk, she said. There's nothing to talk about. Bullshit. You disappear for 2 days. You've got armed security following you around. And there's a rumor, unconfirmed but making the rounds, that a body was found in Greenpoint with ties to organized crime. Margaret's eyes were sharp. Want to connect those dots for me? Ilara's hands were shaking. She shoved them in her pockets. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. Margaret stared at her for a long moment. Then she sighed and sat down behind her desk. You're one of the best trauma nurses I've ever worked with. Smart, fast, unshakable under pressure. But you're about to throw all of that away for a man who's going to get you killed. He's not going to... Yes, he is. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, someone's going to come for you. Someone worse than whoever just ended up dead in Greenpoint. And when that happens, you won't be standing in my office. You'll be lying on a gurney in our trauma bay, and I'll be the one trying to save you. Ilara's throat tightened. I know the risks. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're acting like someone who thinks love is enough. It's not. Love doesn't stop bullets. It doesn't negotiate with people who see you as collateral. It just makes you vulnerable. I'm not going to leave him. Then you're going to die. Margaret's voice was harsh, unapologetic. And I'm going to have to call your next of kin and explain that we did everything we could, But the damage was too extensive. Is that what you want? No, Alara's voice broke. But I don't know how to walk away from him either. I tried. I can't. Margaret's expression softened slightly. Then you need to make a choice, him or this job, because you can't have both. Not if you want to stay alive. Alara walked out of the office feeling like she'd been gutted. She made it through her shift on autopilot, stitched a laceration, stabilized a cardiac patient, held the hand of an overdose victim while the Narcan kicked in. Normal things, safe things, things that didn't involve men in expensive suits shooting each other in warehouses. But when she left the hospital that night, Victor was waiting. And when she got into the car, she saw something that made her blood freeze. A photograph on the seat, black and white, grainy, taken from a distance. It showed Darian on a rain-soaked sidewalk 4 years ago, blood spreading across his chest, and standing over him, hands pressed to his wounds, was a woman in scrubs. Alara. She picked up the photograph with shaking hands, turned it over. On the back, in neat handwriting, someone was watching. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Alara's heart slammed against her ribs. She answered it. Hello? A woman's voice this time, cold, precise. Miss Wren, I hope you enjoyed the photograph. Who is this? Someone who's been very patient. Someone who's watched Darian Volkov for a very long time, waiting for the right moment to take everything he cares about. The voice paused. You're that moment. Alara's vision blurred. What do you want? I want you to understand something. 4 years ago, when Darian was shot, it wasn't random. It was a test. We wanted to see if he'd survive, if he'd find the woman who saved him, if he'd be stupid enough to fall in love. The woman laughed softly. And he was. Predictable to the end. Who are you? Someone who was there that night. Someone who took that photograph while you were pressing your hands to his chest, trying to keep him alive. Someone who's been waiting for this exact moment. Alara couldn't breathe. You set this up. From the beginning. Serrano was a pawn, a distraction. Something to make Darian feel powerful, like he could protect you. But he can't. Because we've always been 3 steps ahead. What do you want from me? I want you to make a choice. The woman's voice hardened. Tonight, midnight, come to the address I'm about to send you. Alone. If you bring Darian, if you tell him about this call, I will kill everyone you've ever cared about. Your supervisor, Margaret. Your neighbor with the cat. The EMT who always brings you coffee. Every single person who's ever shown you kindness. You're insane. No, I'm thorough. A pause. Check your phone. The line went dead. A text message appeared. An address in the Bronx. A warehouse district near the river. Alara stared at the screen. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone. Victor was watching her in the rearview mirror. Miss Wren, are you all right? Fine, Alara lied. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. Because someone had been watching 4 years ago. Someone had orchestrated everything. The shooting, the survival, the chance meeting at the auction. Someone had turned her entire relationship with Darian into a trap. And now that trap was closing. What's up? Alara made it to the warehouse apartment in Bay Ridge before she fell apart. Darian was waiting for her, and the moment he saw her face, he knew something was wrong. What happened? Alara showed him the photograph. Darian went completely still. He took the photo from her hands, stared at it for a long moment, then looked up with an expression that made her chest ache. Where did you get this? It was in the car. Victor didn't put it there. Someone else did. That's impossible. The car is... Darian. Alara's voice shook. Someone's been watching us since the beginning. Since that night 4 years ago. They have photographs. They know everything. Darian's jaw clenched. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Spoke in rapid Russian, his voice sharp and commanding. Hung up. Victor's checking the car for tracking devices, he said. And I'm pulling security footage from every street you've been on for the past week. Won't matter. What do you mean? Alara told him about the phone call. About the woman's voice, about the ultimatum. Darian's expression went from controlled to murderous in the space of a heartbeat. You're not going, he said. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. We'll disappear. Leave the city. I have resources. She said she'll kill everyone I care about if I don't show up.
Margaret, my neighbors, people I've worked with. Alara's voice broke. I can't let that happen.
Then I'm coming with you. She said if you come, she'll kill them anyway. I don't care. I do. Alara grabbed his arms. Darian, please. I can't have more blood on my hands. I can't be the reason innocent people die. You're not going alone to meet someone who's been planning this for 4 years. Darian's voice was steel. That's not negotiable. Then what do we do? Darian was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone again and made another call. Luca, he said, I need a favor. The plan was insane. Alara would go to the warehouse, alone, as instructed, but Darian's men would be positioned around the perimeter, far enough that they wouldn't trigger any alarms, close enough to move in if things went wrong. Darian wanted to wire her, put a tracker in her shoe, give her a weapon. Alara refused all of it. If they search me and find anything, they'll know I didn't come alone, she said, and then everyone dies. Then I'll follow you. No. Alara, no. She cupped his face in her hands. You have to trust me, just this once. Let me do this my way. Darian looked at her like she was asking him to cut out his own heart. I can't lose you, he whispered. You won't. Alara kissed him, soft and desperate. I promise. She was lying, and they both knew it, but Darian let her go anyway. The warehouse in the Bronx was exactly the kind of place where bad things happened. Rusted metal siding, broken windows, a loading dock that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The street was empty except for a single black car parked under a broken streetlight. Alara walked toward the entrance, her breath fogging in the November cold. Every instinct she had developed working in trauma was screaming at her to run, but she didn't. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was vast and dark, lit only by a few industrial lights hanging from the ceiling. Shipping containers lined the walls. The air smelled like rust and old oil. Miss Wren, the voice echoed from somewhere above. Thank you for coming. Alara looked up. A woman stood on a catwalk 20 feet above the warehouse floor. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, dressed in expensive clothes that looked out of place in this industrial graveyard. Who are you? Alara called up. My name is Katya Volkov. The woman smiled. Darian's sister. Alara's world tilted. That's impossible, she said. Darian doesn't have a sister. He told you that? Katya laughed. How convenient. Let me guess. He told you he came to New York alone, built everything from nothing, never mentioned that his family sent him here to expand operations, or that I've been running the European side of our business for the past 15 years. Alara's hands were shaking. You're lying. Am I? Ask yourself this. How did Darian find you at that charity auction? How did he know you'd be there? How did he recognize you after 4 years when he was barely conscious the night you saved him? He said he remembered my hands, the way you clasped them. Yes, very romantic. Katya's smile turned cold. Except I'm the one who told him about the auction. I'm the one who tracked you down using security footage from the hospital. I'm the one who orchestrated the entire meeting because my brother needed leverage, and you were perfect. Alara felt like the floor was dropping out from under her. No. Yes. Katya started walking down the metal stairs, her heels ringing against the grating. Darian was getting soft, making mistakes, letting sentiment cloud his judgment. So I gave him a project. I said, find the woman who saved your life. Make her fall in love with you. Use her to expand your influence into Queens, into the hospitals, the unions, the city infrastructure we've been trying to infiltrate for years. That's not true. Darian loves me. Oh, I'm sure he does now. My brother has always been sentimental, prone to attachment. Katya reached the warehouse floor and walked toward Alara with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. But it started as a job, a manipulation, and you fell for it beautifully. Alara's vision blurred. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand what you really are to him. You're not his salvation. You're not his redemption. You're a tool, a means to an end. And now that you've served your purpose, I need you to disappear. And if I don't, Katya pulled a gun from her jacket, pointed it at Alara's chest. Then I'll make you, she said calmly. But I'd prefer if you just walked away. Told Darian you realized you couldn't live in his world. Broke his heart cleanly. It would be easier for everyone. Alara stared at the gun, at Katya's cold smile, at the shipping containers and the broken windows and the single exit that might as well have been a mile away. And she realized something. She'd been played from the beginning. Every dinner, every conversation, every moment she'd thought was real had been orchestrated by a woman who saw her as nothing more than a chess piece. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Katya's eyes narrowed. "Who's texting you?"
Alara didn't answer, because she knew if she reached for her phone, Katya would shoot her. "I said, who's texting you?" The warehouse door exploded inward. Darian came through it like a storm, gun drawn, Victor and 4 other men flanking him. "Put it down, Katya," he said quietly. Katya's gun didn't waver from Alara's chest. "I told her to come alone."
"And you really thought I'd let that happen?" Darian's voice was ice. "I've known about your plan for 2 weeks. Did you think I wouldn't notice when you started moving money through shell companies? When you made contact with Sorano behind my back? When you orchestrated an entire threat just to push Alara into a corner?" Katya's smile didn't falter. "So you know. Doesn't change anything. The gun is still pointed at her heart. And mine is pointed at yours." Darian took a step forward. "But here's the difference. You're my blood, and I'll still kill you to protect her." "No, you won't. You've never been able to pull the trigger on family. Try me." The air in the warehouse was so tense Alara could barely breathe. She could see Darian's finger on the trigger, could see the calculation in Katya's eyes. "Last chance," Darian said. "Put down the gun." Katya's hand tightened. Alara moved without thinking, threw herself sideways the way she'd been trained in hospital active shooter drills. The gun went off. Pain exploded through Alara's shoulder, white-hot and consuming. She hit the concrete floor hard, and her vision went black at the edges. More gunshots, shouting, the sound of bodies hitting the ground. Then Darian's face, inches from hers, his hands on her shoulder, applying pressure. "Stay with me," he was saying. His voice was shaking. "Alara, stay with me. Keep your eyes open." Alara tried to focus, tried to breathe, but the pain was overwhelming, and the darkness was closing in. "You lied," she whispered. "What?" "Your sister said you lied, that you were using me." Darian's face crumbled. "No, listen to me. She's insane. She's been trying to sabotage me for years because she thinks I'm weak. Everything she told you was designed to break us apart." "How do I know you're telling the truth?" "Because I'm here." His hands pressed harder against her shoulder. "Because I chose you over her. Because I'd burn my entire empire to the ground if it meant keeping you alive." Alara's vision was fading. She could hear sirens in the distance, could feel Darian's hands on her, warm and steady, just like 4 years ago. "Don't you dare," he was saying. "Don't you dare leave me, not after everything. Alara, Alara." But the darkness was pulling her under. And the last thing she saw before everything went black was Darian's face, terrified and broken and completely, utterly human. Alara woke up in a hospital bed. Not Queen's General. Somewhere private. The room was too quiet, too clean, and the machines monitoring her vitals were top of the line. Darian was asleep in a chair next to her bed, his head resting on his crossed arms. He looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained with what looked like blood. Her blood. Alara tried to sit up. Pain shot through her shoulder and she gasped. Darian's eyes snapped open. He was on his feet instantly, hands hovering over her like he was afraid to touch her. "Don't move," he said hoarsely. "You had surgery. The bullet went through your shoulder, missed the bone, but you lost a lot of blood." "How long?" 18 hours. His voice cracked. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours, and I've been losing my mind." Alara looked at him, really looked at him, at the fear in his eyes, at the way his hands were shaking. "Your sister," she said. Darian's jaw clenched. "Dead. Victor shot her when she fired at you. She's gone." "I'm sorry." "Don't." He sat down on the edge of her bed, careful not to jostle her. "Don't apologize for surviving. Don't apologize for her being insane. Just don't." Was she telling the truth? Alara's voice was barely a whisper. "Did you use me?" Darian looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. The same photograph Katya had sent. Darian on the sidewalk, Alara's hands on his chest. "I've carried this for 4 years," he said quietly. "Katya took it, sent it to me in the hospital as proof that someone had saved me. But she didn't find you. I did. I spent 4 years searching because I needed to know if you were real. Not because I wanted to use you. Because I needed to thank you." He set the photograph on the bedside table. "When I saw you at that auction, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an agenda. I just knew I couldn't let you walk out of that room humiliated. And everything that happened after, every dinner, every conversation, every moment, was real. I swear it." Alara's eyes burned. "How do I know you're not lying?" "You don't." Darian's voice was raw. "You'll have to decide whether to trust me. And if you can't, if Katya's poison worked and you can't see past her manipulation, then I'll let you go. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." "That's not fair." "None of this is fair. But I'm not going to trap you with guilt or obligation or anything else. You get to choose, me or your freedom, and I'll respect whichever you pick." Alara closed her eyes, felt the pain in her shoulder, thought about Margaret's warning, about Serrano's threats, about waking up in a hospital bed because she'd been shot trying to protect a man who lived in a world that would always be dangerous. She should walk away. She knew she should. But when she opened her eyes and saw Darian looking at her like she was the only thing holding him together, she realized something. She'd already made her choice. She'd made it the moment she stepped into that Bronx warehouse. She'd made it when she'd thrown herself sideways to avoid Katya's bullet. She'd made it 4 years ago on a rain-soaked sidewalk when she'd pressed her hands to a dying man's chest and refused to let him go. "I choose you," Alara whispered. "God help me. I choose you." Darian's face broke. He leaned forward carefully, pressed his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you." And Alara knew, with the certainty of someone who'd spent years watching people fight for their lives, that she'd just committed to something that would either save her or destroy her. There was no middle ground. Not anymore. Recovery was hell. Not the physical part. Alara had dealt with worse injuries in the trauma ward, watched patients fight through pain that would break most people. The bullet had gone clean through her shoulder, missed the major arteries, and the surgeon had done excellent work. 6 weeks, they said. Maybe 8. Then physical therapy and she'd be back to normal. The hell was everything else? Darian moved her into the warehouse in Red Hook the day she was discharged. Not because she couldn't go home, her apartment in Astoria was still there, still hers, but because he refused to let her out of his sight. "Just until we're sure," he'd said, "until we know Katya didn't have other people working with her." Alara had been too exhausted to argue, so she lived in the warehouse with the books and the harbor view, and Darian watching her like she might shatter at any moment. Victor brought her meals. A physical therapist came 3 times a week. Darian worked from home, or what passed for home in his world, conducting business in Russian on encrypted phones while Alara sat on the couch reading medical journals and trying not to go insane. Margaret called every other day. Alara stopped answering after the first week because she couldn't explain why she was living with a man who'd just killed his own sister to protect her. The texts from Margaret got more insistent. "You need to come back to work. Your leave is running out. Call me." Alara deleted them. On the 3rd week, Darian found her crying in the bathroom at 2 in the morning. He didn't ask what was wrong, just sat down on the tile floor next to her and waited. "I can't do this," Alara finally said. Her voice was raw from sobbing. "I can't live like this, locked in here, waiting for the next threat, wondering if someone else is going to come after me because I made the mistake of falling in love with you." Darian's jaw tightened. "What do you want me to do?" "I don't know." Alara wiped her eyes. "Let me go back to work. Let me have my life back." "You know I can't do that. Not yet." "Why? Katya's dead. Serrano's dead. Who else is there?" "I don't know. That's the problem." Darian's hands clenched into fists. "Katya had connections all over Europe. She could have told anyone about you before she died. And until I know for certain that every loose end is tied up, you're staying here where I can protect you." "I don't want to be protected. I want to be alive." "You are alive, because I made sure of it." "No." Alara stood up, her shoulders screaming in protest. "I'm existing. That's not the same thing." Darian stood too, blocking the bathroom doorway with his body. "What do you want from me, Alara? You want me to apologize for keeping you safe?" You want me to say I'm sorry for loving you enough to make sure you don't end up dead in a warehouse? I want you to trust me to make my own decisions. I want you to stop treating me like I'm fragile. You got shot 3 weeks ago, and I've treated gunshot wounds for 6 years. I know how they heal. I know what I can handle. Ilara stepped closer to him. But what I can't handle is you deciding what's best for me without asking. That's not love, Darian. That's control. His expression cracked. For a moment, she saw past the controlled exterior to the fear underneath. I can't lose you, he said quietly. If something happens to you because I wasn't careful enough, because I let you walk into danger, then that's my choice to make, not yours. They stared at each other in the small bathroom, both breathing hard, both terrified in different ways. 1 week, Darian finally said. Give me 1 more week to make sure Katya didn't have other plans in motion. Then you can go back to work, back to your apartment, back to whatever life you want. And you? I'll be there, in the shadows, watching, but I won't trap you. His voice was hoarse. I promise. Ilara wanted to believe him, but promises in Darian's world had a way of breaking. Bummet. The week passed in tense silence. Darian was gone most days, meeting with people whose names Ilara didn't know and didn't ask about. Victor stayed at the warehouse, a constant presence by the door. The physical therapist came and went. Ilara's shoulder slowly started to heal. On the 6th day, Darian came home early. Ilara was in the kitchen, trying to make tea one-handed, when she heard the door open. She turned and saw his face. Something was wrong. What happened? She asked. Darian set down his phone, walked to the window, stared out at the harbor for a long moment before speaking. Katya had a contingency plan, he said quietly. If she died, certain information would be released to law enforcement. Names, locations, evidence of operations I've been running for the past 10 years. Ilara's stomach dropped. When? 72 hours from now, unless I do what she wanted. Which is? Disappear, leave New York, dissolve my entire operation, and walk away. Darian's hands clenched on the windowsill. She set it up before she died, probably knew I'd kill her, wanted to make sure I paid for it. Can you stop it? Maybe. I have people working on it, but Katya was thorough. If we can't find the source before the deadline, he turned to face her. I'm going to prison for a very long time. Ilara's legs felt weak. She sat down at the kitchen table. So what are you going to do? Run or fight. Darian crossed the room and knelt in front of her. But either way, you can't be part of it. If I run, they'll use you to find me. If I fight and lose, they'll charge you as an accessory. That's insane. I haven't done anything. You're living with me. You've accepted my protection. You were present when Katya died. Darian's voice was flat. They'll find a way to make it stick. Then we run together. No. Darian, no. His hands came up to frame her face. I'm not letting you throw away your life for me. You're going back to your apartment, back to work, back to being Dr. Ilara Wren, who saves lives and has nothing to do with the criminal who's about to disappear. You can't make that choice for me. I already have. Ilara shoved his hands away and stood up. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she ignored it. You promised. You said you wouldn't trap me. You said you'd let me make my own decisions. That was before I knew staying with me would destroy you. I'm already destroyed. The words ripped out of her, sharp and raw. You think I can just go back to my old life and pretend none of this happened? Pretend I didn't fall in love with you? Pretend I didn't watch you kill your own sister to protect me? Yes. Because the alternative is watching you go to prison for crimes you didn't commit. So what? You just walk away? Disappear? And I'm supposed to accept that? Yes. Ilara's vision blurred with tears. You're a coward. Darian flinched like she'd hit him. Maybe, but I'm a coward who loves you enough to let you go. He stood up, walked to the door, turned back one last time. Victor will take you home tomorrow morning, he said quietly. By the time you wake up, I'll be gone. Don't try to find me. Don't try to contact me. Just live your life. Be the person you were before you saved me. Darian! But he was already walking out. Ilara heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard the door to his office close, heard the lock click into place. She stood in the kitchen, alone, and felt something inside her break clean in half. Oh, she didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. Just lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the warehouse, the creak of metal, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional footstep from Darian's office that proved he wasn't sleeping either. At 4 a.m, she got up. Her shoulder protested as she pulled on jeans and a sweater, but she'd learned to work through pain. She walked quietly through the warehouse, past Victor sleeping in a chair by the door, up the stairs to Darian's office. The door was locked. "Darian," she said quietly, "I know you're in there." Silence. "I'm not leaving tomorrow. You can't make me." More silence. Alara leaned her forehead against the door. "I saved your life 4 years ago because I couldn't stand to watch someone die when I had the power to stop it. And I'm not going to stand by now and watch you destroy yourself to protect me. So either you open this door and we figure this out together, or I'm going to the police and telling them everything. Every name, every operation, everything you've ever told me." The lock clicked. The door opened. Darian stood there looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past 12 hours. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were red. He looked at her like she was a problem he couldn't solve. "You wouldn't," he said. "Try me." Alara pushed past him into the office. "You think I'm going to let you martyr yourself? You think I'm just going to go back to Queen's General and pretend I don't know what happened?" "Yes, because that's the smart thing to do." "I don't care about smart. I care about you." Darian laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You shouldn't. I've brought you nothing but pain. You've brought me a lot of things. Pain, yes, but also joy, purpose. Someone who sees me as more than just a nurse who works too many hours." Alara crossed the room to stand in front of him. "You made me feel alive for the first time in years. And I'm not walking away from that just because it's hard." "Alara, no. Listen to me." She grabbed his shirt with her good hand. "I don't care if you have to run. I don't care if we spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. I'd rather have that with you than safety without you." "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do. I'm a trauma nurse. I've watched people die. I know what it looks like when someone gives up. And I'm not letting you give up on us." Darian's control shattered. He pulled her against him, careful of her shoulder, and buried his face in her hair. "I can't protect you if you won't let me," he whispered. "I don't need protection. I need you." They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the pre-dawn darkness. Then Darian's phone rang. He pulled away, checked the screen, and his entire body went rigid. "What?" Alara asked. "It's Luca, Serrano's second in command." Darian answered the call. "What?" Even from across the room, Alara could hear the urgency in Luca's voice. Darian's expression went from tense to murderous. "When?" More talking. "How many?" Darian hung up, looked at Alara with an expression that made her blood run cold. "What happened?" she asked. "Katya's contingency plan just activated early. Someone leaked information to the FBI. They're moving on my operations in 2 hours. Every warehouse, every business, every person who's ever worked for me." His jaw clenched. "And they have a warrant for my arrest." "How is that possible? You said 72 hours. Someone moved up the timeline. Someone who knew about Katya's plan and decided to accelerate it. Darian's hands were shaking. "I need to move. Now. Get my people out. Burn evidence. Disappear before they kick down the door." "Then do it. I'll help." "No, you're leaving. Victor." The door opened. Victor appeared, instantly alert. "Get her out of here," Darian said. "Take her to her apartment. Make sure she's inside before the FBI arrives. And Victor," his voice cracked, "make sure they know she had nothing to do with any of this." "Boss, do it. Now." Victor nodded and moved toward Alara. Alara backed away. "I'm not going." "Yes, you are." "No, I'm not leaving you." "Alara, please." Darian's voice was desperate. "I'm begging you. Walk away. Save yourself. Don't let me be the reason your life falls apart. It's too late for that." Alara's voice was steady, even though her heart was pounding. "My life fell apart the moment I pressed my hands to your chest 4 years ago. I just didn't know it yet." Darian stared at her. Then he turned to Victor. "Leave us." Victor hesitated, then walked out and closed the door. Darian crossed the room and grabbed Alara's shoulders, gentle despite the desperation in his eyes. If you stay, you go down with me, he said. They'll charge you. They'll destroy your nursing license. You'll lose everything you've worked for. I know. Then why? Because I love you. Alara's voice broke. Because you're the first person who's ever looked at me and seen someone worth protecting, and I'm not going to abandon you when you need me most. Darian's eyes closed. You're going to regret this. Probably. But I'd regret leaving more. He kissed her then, hard and desperate and full of everything they couldn't say out loud. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Darian pulled out his phone and made a call. Luca, change your plans. I'm not running. He looked at Alara. I'm fighting. Whooped. The next 2 hours were chaos. Darian made calls, gave orders in Russian and English and Italian. Victor and 5 other men showed up with duffel bags full of things Alara tried not to look at too closely. Darian pulled her aside while the men were setting up. Here's what's going to happen, he said quietly. The FBI is coming, but I have one advantage. They don't know I know they're coming, so I'm going to make them an offer. What kind of offer? Names, locations, evidence on people higher up the chain than me, people Katya worked with in Europe, people the FBI has been trying to catch for years. Darian's expression was grim. In exchange, they give me immunity, and they leave you out of it entirely. Alara's chest tightened. You're going to turn informant. I'm going to survive. There's a difference. Darian, if you do this, those people will come after you. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. I'm already doing that. At least this way I'll have the FBI between me and them. He cupped her face. And you'll be safe. That's all that matters. What about us? There is no us if you're in prison. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I need you alive and free more than I need you with me. Do you understand? Alara's eyes burned. No, I don't, because I need you. You'll survive without me. You've been surviving your whole life. That's not living. It's better than dying. Before Alara could respond, Victor appeared in the doorway. Boss? They're here. Darian's entire body went tense. He pulled Alara behind him and walked to the window. Below, on the street, 3 black SUVs were pulling up. Men in FBI windbreakers were getting out, weapons drawn. Upstairs, Darian said to Victor. Get her upstairs. Lock the door. Don't open it until I tell you. I'm not hiding while you... Yes, you are. Darian turned to face her. Please. This is the one thing I'm asking you to do. Let me handle this. Trust me. Alara wanted to argue, wanted to stay by his side. But she saw the fear in his eyes, not fear for himself, but fear for her, and she nodded. Victor led her up the metal stairs to the 2nd floor, into a small room with reinforced walls and a heavy door. He locked it from the outside. Alara pressed her ear to the door and listened. Darian's voice, calm and controlled. I'm unarmed. I'm coming out. The sound of the warehouse door opening. Then a voice Alara didn't recognize, amplified by a bullhorn. Darian Volkov, you're under arrest. Put your hands behind your head and walk toward us slowly. Darian's footsteps. Steady, unhurried. I'd like to make a deal, he said. We don't make deals with... You will when you hear what I have. Darian's voice was steel. I have names, evidence, information on operations spanning 3 continents, people your agency has been chasing for a decade. But I'll only talk to one person. Who? Agent Sarah Chen. I know she's leading the task force. Get her on the phone. Now. Silence. Then murmured conversation. Alara's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Minutes passed. 5. 10. Then Darian's voice again. Agent Chen, thank you for taking my call. Alara couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, just Darian's responses. Yes, that's correct. 12 locations, 47 names, financial records going back 8 years. In exchange for full immunity and protection for someone who has nothing to do with my operations. A pause. Her name is Alara Wren. She's a trauma nurse. She saved my life 4 years ago, and I've been obsessed with her ever since, but she's innocent, never participated in anything illegal, never knew what I was until 3 months ago, and I want written confirmation that she walks away from this clean. Another pause. Good. Then we have a deal. The sound of handcuffs clicking.
Alara's breath stopped. Wait, Darian's voice.
One more thing. There's someone in the building who needs to be escorted out safely. Second floor, locked room. Her name is Alara Wren. Make sure she gets home. Footsteps on the stairs. Someone knocked on the door. Miss Wren? This is Agent Chen. Mr. Volkov asked us to escort you out. Are you injured? Alara's hands were shaking. She unlocked the door. A woman in her 40s stood there, FBI badge clipped to her belt, weapon holstered, expression professional, but not unkind. Are you hurt? Agent Chen asked again. No. Good. Come with me. Alara followed her down the stairs, through the warehouse, past Victor, who was being cuffed by two agents, past the scattered equipment and the books and the windows overlooking the harbor. Outside, the November air was cold enough to burn. Darian was already in one of the SUVs. Through the tinted window, Alara could just make out his silhouette. She walked toward the vehicle. Agent Chen put a hand on her arm. You can't talk to him. Please, just no contact. Those are the terms of his deal. 5 seconds. That's all I need. Agent Chen studied her. Then she sighed and nodded. 5 seconds. Alara walked to the SUV. The window rolled down. Darian looked at her, and his expression was so raw it made her chest ache. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be. This is going to hurt for a while. But you'll survive. You always do. What about you? I'll be fine. Witness protection. New name. New life. Somewhere far from here. His voice cracked. I'll think about you every day. Darian, I love you. He said it quickly, desperately, like he was running out of time. I love you, and I'm sorry I couldn't be the man you deserved. The window started rolling up. Alara grabbed the edge. Wait, where are they taking you? I don't know, and I can't tell you even if I did. The window closed completely. The SUV pulled away. Alara stood in the street, watching it disappear into the November morning, and felt her entire world collapse. Agent Chen touched her shoulder. We'll need a statement, but not today. Go home. Rest. We'll contact you. Am I under arrest? No. Mr. Volkov was very clear that you had no knowledge of his activities. As far as we're concerned, you're a victim. Alara almost laughed. Victim. Right. A different agent drove her back to her apartment in Astoria, walked her to her door, made sure she got inside safely, then left her alone. Alara stood in her apartment, the same apartment she'd lived in for 6 years, the same space that felt both familiar and completely foreign, and looked around. The radiator was still working. Darian had fixed it months ago. There was still food in her fridge from the last delivery he'd sent. Her toothbrush, the one she'd kept at the warehouse, was in her bathroom because she'd brought it home last week. Evidence of him everywhere and nowhere. Her phone rang. Margaret. Alara answered it. Where the hell have you been? Margaret demanded. I've been calling for weeks. Your leave is up. You need to come back to work or... I'll be there Monday, Alara said quietly. What? Monday. I'll be there. I'm ready to come back. Margaret was silent for a moment. Are you okay? No, but I will be. She hung up before Margaret could ask more questions. Then Alara Wren, trauma nurse from Queens, sat down on her couch and let herself break. She cried for Darian, for the life they'd almost had, for the warehouse and the books and the Thursday dinners, and the way he'd looked at her like she was the only real thing in a world made of smoke. She cried until she had nothing left. Then she stood up, washed her face, made coffee, and started planning how to survive without him. 3 days later, the news broke. Federal authorities had dismantled one of the largest organized crime operations on the East Coast. 47 arrests, 12 locations raided, millions in assets seized. The name Darian Volkov was mentioned once, in passing. A cooperating witness. Location unknown. Alara watched the news with a hollow feeling in her chest. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then something made her pick up. Hello? Silence. Then a voice she'd know anywhere, distorted slightly by a bad connection. I'm not supposed to call, Darian said. They'll trace this in about 30 seconds, but I needed to hear your voice. Alara's breath caught. Where are you? Can't say, but I'm safe, protected, and I'm going to stay that way as long as I keep cooperating. When will I see you again?
Silence. Darian? I don't know, he said quietly. Maybe never. It's safer that way. For who? For you. Alara closed her eyes. I hate you. I know, but you'll hate me less once enough time passes. Once you meet someone else. Someone normal. Someone who doesn't come with a body count and a target on his back. There's no one else. There will be. His voice was breaking. I have to go. They're tracking this. Just know that I love you, that I'll always love you, and that letting you go is the hardest thing I've ever done. The line went dead. Alara sat there holding her phone, staring at the screen, and realized something. She wasn't going to survive this by moving on. She was going to survive it by finding him. And when she did, she was going to make damn sure he understood that walking away wasn't protection. It was cowardice. And Alara Wren didn't fall in love with cowards. She fell in love with a man who'd killed his own sister to protect her, and she wasn't done fighting for him yet. Alara went back to work on Monday. Not because she was ready, not because the pain in her shoulder had fully healed, or because she'd stopped waking up at 3 a.m. reaching for someone who wasn't there. She went back because staying in her apartment meant drowning in the silence Darian had left behind. The trauma ward welcomed her back with the kind of brutal efficiency that left no room for grief. A stabbing victim in Bay 3, a cardiac arrest in the hallway, a teenager who'd wrapped his motorcycle around a telephone pole and was coding despite everything they pumped into him. Alara worked her shift with mechanical precision, started an IV, called for blood, compressed a chest until her arms screamed, lost the patient anyway. Margaret found her in the supply closet after the shift ended, sitting on an overturned bucket with her head in her hands. You're not okay, Margaret said. It wasn't a question. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. Margaret sat down on a box of gauze. The man you were seeing, he's gone, isn't he? Alara didn't answer. I saw the news, the FBI raid. I put it together. Margaret's voice was gentle. Do you want to talk about it? No. Do you need time off? No, I need to work. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Okay, but if you change your mind, I won't. Alara went home that night, showered, ate food she couldn't taste, and fell asleep with her phone in her hand waiting for a call that never came. The next day was the same, and the next, and the next. 3 weeks passed. Alara worked, slept poorly, avoided her neighbors, ignored the messages from friends asking where she'd been. The warehouse in Red Hook had been seized by the FBI along with everything else. The books, the harbor view, the couch where she'd sat with Darian and felt, for the first time in years, like she wasn't alone. All of it was gone. And Alara was learning that grief was just a slow-motion bleeding out that no amount of training could stop. On the 4th week, something changed. Alara was leaving the hospital after a late shift when she noticed a car following her. Not the black sedan from months ago. This was a gray Honda, nondescript and careful. It stayed 3 cars back. Never got close, but it was there. Alara's instincts, honed by months of living with a target on her back, kicked in immediately. She took the train home instead of walking, changed cars twice, got off at a random stop and waited on the platform. The Honda was still there when she emerged onto the street. Alara pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd memorized but never called. Agent Sarah Chen answered on the second ring. Miss Wren, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. There's a car following me, gray Honda, license plate. Alara rattled off the numbers. Is it yours? A pause. No, we don't have surveillance on you. Then who does? I don't know, but I'll find out. Where are you? Alara gave her location. I'm going home. If someone tries to approach me, don't engage. Call 911. I'll have local units in your area within 5 minutes. The line went dead. Alara kept walking. The Honda followed. She made it to her building, climbed the 4 flights to her apartment, and locked herself inside with shaking hands. Then she waited. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Gray Honda is gone. We're running the plates. Stay inside tonight. Alara didn't sleep. She sat on her couch with every light on, watching the street through her window, and tried to figure out who would be watching her now. Darian was gone. Katya was dead. Serrano was dead. The FBI had dismantled the entire operation.
So who was left? The answer came at 2 in the morning when someone knocked on her door. Alara grabbed the kitchen knife she'd been keeping on the coffee table and approached the door slowly. Who is it? Luca Moretti. The voice was accented, Italian, familiar. Serrano's second. We met briefly. I need to talk to you. Alara's blood went cold. I'm calling the police. Please don't. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because Darian asked me to check on you. Darian's in witness protection. He can't contact anyone. He found a way. Please, open the door. Alara knew she shouldn't, knew this was exactly the kind of decision that ended badly, but she opened the door anyway. Luca Moretti stood in her hallway looking nothing like the dangerous criminal she'd expected. Mid-30s, expensive suit, tired eyes. He held up both hands to show he wasn't armed. 5 minutes, he said. That's all I'm asking. Alara stepped aside and let him in. Luca walked to her window, checked the street, then turned to face her. The gray Honda was mine. I'm sorry for scaring you. I needed to make sure no one else was watching you before I made contact. Why are you watching me at all? Because Darian asked me to. Before he disappeared, he made me promise to keep you safe. Make sure no one came after you for revenge. Make sure you were able to go back to your normal life. Alara's chest tightened. Where is he? I don't know. Witness protection doesn't share locations, but he found a way to send me a message through an encrypted channel we set up years ago. He said you were in danger. From who? Katya had allies in Europe. People who didn't appreciate the information Darian gave to the FBI. People who lost money and freedom because he cooperated. Luca's expression was grim. They can't get to him. But they can get to you. Alara's legs felt weak. She sat down on the couch. So this never ends. It will. I'm handling it, quietly, making sure those people understand that touching you would be a mistake. Luca pulled an envelope from his jacket. But Darian wanted you to have this, in case something happens to me, in case you need to disappear. Alara took the envelope. Inside was a passport, her photo, a different name, along with $20,000 in cash and a handwritten note on plain paper. The note read, "If you're reading this, something went wrong. Use the passport. The money will get you to Toronto. There's an apartment waiting. Address on the back. Don't contact anyone from your old life. Just go. Please. I can't protect you if you stay. D." Alara's hands were shaking. "He thinks I'm going to run. He thinks you're smart enough to survive. There's a difference." Luca moved toward the door. "Keep the passport. Keep the money. If I don't contact you within 2 weeks, use them. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Just go. And if you do contact me, then the threat is handled, and you can keep living your life." Luca opened the door, paused, and looked back. "For what it's worth, I've known Darian for 8 years. I've seen him kill people without blinking, but I've never seen him care about anyone the way he cares about you. Whatever happens, remember that." Then he was gone. Alara sat on her couch holding the passport and the money and Darian's note and realized something that made her blood run cold. She was done running. She was done hiding. And she was done letting other people decide what was best for her. If Darian thought she was going to disappear to Toronto and spend the rest of her life wondering what happened to him, he'd underestimated exactly how stubborn a trauma nurse from Queens could be. The next morning, Alara called Agent Chen. "I need to talk to you," Alara said, "about Darian Volkov, about the deal he made, and about the people who are coming after me because of it." Agent Chen was silent for a moment. "Come to my office, 2 p.m. Don't tell anyone you're coming." Alara took the train to the FBI field office in Manhattan, went through security, was escorted to a small conference room where Agent Chen waited with a stack of files and a recording device. "Everything you say here is on the record," Agent Chen said. "Do you understand?" "Yes." "Why did you want to meet?" Alara pulled out the passport and the money, set them on the table. "Luca Moretti came to see me last night. He said people in Europe are coming after me because of what Darian told you, and he gave me this, an escape plan if things go wrong." Agent Chen's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "We've been monitoring Moretti. We know he's been keeping surveillance on you. Then you know I'm in danger." "Yes, which is why we've been considering offering you protection." "I don't want protection." Alara leaned forward. I want to testify. Agent Chen blinked. Testify to what? To everything Darian told me, every name, every operation, every conversation we had about his business. Alara's voice was steady. He gave you information to save me. Now I'm going to give you everything I know to finish what he started. Miss Wren, you're not a cooperating witness. You're a civilian. You have no obligation. I know, but I'm volunteering anyway. Alara met her eyes. Because the people who are threatening me won't stop until I'm dead or they're in prison, and I'd rather put them in prison. Agent Chen studied her for a long moment. You understand this will destroy any chance you have of seeing Darian again. If you testify, you'll be marked. You'll need protection. You'll have to relocate, change your identity, leave behind everything you know. I know. And you're willing to do that? Yes. Because Darian spent months trying to protect me by keeping me in the dark, by making decisions for me, by treating me like I was too fragile to handle the truth. Alara's voice cracked. I'm not fragile, I'm a trauma nurse. I've held dying people in my arms and told them they were going to be okay, even when I knew they weren't. I can handle this. Agent Chen turned off the recording device, leaned back in her chair. Off the record, she said quietly. What you're proposing is incredibly dangerous. These people don't just kill witnesses, they make examples of them. Are you prepared for that? Are you prepared to let them keep operating because you're too afraid to protect me? Agent Chen smiled grimly. Fair point. She turned the recording device back on. All right, Miss Wren, let's talk about what you know. Alara told her everything. About the dinners, the warehouse, the books, the way Darian had described his operations in fragments, never enough to incriminate himself, but enough that a smart investigator could piece together the larger picture. She told Agent Chen about Katya, about the night in the Bronx warehouse, about the photograph and the revelation that everything had been orchestrated. She told her about Sorano, about Luca, about the encrypted messages and the gray Honda and the passport with a fake name. By the time she finished, it was almost 6 p.m. Agent Chen had filled 3 legal pads with notes. This is enough, she said quietly. More than enough. We can move on the European connections within 48 hours, but you understand what happens next. I go into protection. Yes, new name, new city, new life. You'll never work as a nurse again, too easy to trace through licensing. You'll never contact anyone from your old life, not your friends, not your colleagues, not Darian, Alara finished. I know. Can you live with that? Alara thought about the warehouse, about Thursday dinners and harbor views and the way Darian had looked at her like she was the only real thing in a world made of smoke. I don't have a choice, she said. If I don't do this, I'm dead anyway. At least this way I'm fighting back. Agent Chen nodded. We'll move you tonight. Pack light, just essentials. Leave your phone behind. We'll provide you with everything else. Can I? Alara's voice broke. Can I leave a message for Darian? Something to let him know I'm okay? No direct contact. It's too dangerous. Then indirect contact, a note, an email, something. Agent Chen was silent for a moment. Then she sighed. I'll see what I can do, but no promises. They moved Alara to a safe house in upstate New York that night. Not the picturesque kind with rolling hills and charming barns. The kind that was a concrete box with reinforced windows and armed guards who changed shifts every 8 hours. Alara spent 3 days there being debriefed by federal prosecutors, answering the same questions over and over, identifying photographs, signing documents. On the 4th day, Agent Chen came to see her. We've made arrests, she said. 7 people in Europe. 3 in New York, all tied to Katya's network. All people who were planning to come after you. Alara's breath caught. So it's over? For now, but we're not taking chances. You're still going into protection. Where? Seattle. We've set up an identity for you. Sarah Mitchell, office manager at a tech company. Apartment in Capitol Hill. You start in 2 weeks. Alara closed her eyes. Seattle. 3,000 miles from New York. From the hospital, from the life she'd built. What about Darian? She asked quietly. Agent Chen pulled an envelope from her jacket. He doesn't know you testified. He doesn't know you're in protection, and we can't tell him. It's too dangerous. Then what's this? A letter. From him to you. It was intercepted by our monitoring system. He sent it through an encrypted channel to Luca Moretti, who was supposed to deliver it if something happened to you. Agent Chen set the envelope on the table. I'm breaking protocol by giving you this, but I figure you've earned it. She walked out before Alara could thank her. Alara sat alone in the safe house, holding the envelope. Her hands were shaking. She opened it. The letter was written in Darian's careful handwriting on plain white paper. Alara, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or you're in danger I couldn't prevent. Either way, I failed you. I'm sorry. I've spent the past month in a small town in Montana where no one knows my name, and the only thing that matters is whether you pay your tab at the diner. It's quiet, safe, empty. Everything I thought I wanted. But it's not home, because home was wherever you were. The warehouse, your apartment, that Vietnamese place in Sunset Park where we ate soup, and you told me about your patients like they were characters in a story only you understood. I miss you. I miss the way you held your hands behind your back when you were nervous. I miss the way you called me out when I was being controlling. I miss the way you made me believe, just for a little while, that I could be someone worth loving. I know you're angry. I know you think I'm a coward for walking away. Maybe you're right, but I'd rather be a living coward who knows you're safe than a dead hero who got you killed. If Luca gave you the passport and the money, use them. Don't stay in New York. Don't wait for me. I'm never coming back. Not because I don't love you. I love you more than I've ever loved anything, but because coming back would put you in danger, and I can't live with that. Be safe. Be happy. Forget about me. I'll never forget about you. D. Alara read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and made a decision. She wasn't going to forget about him, but she was going to survive. And maybe, someday, if the universe had any sense of mercy, their paths would cross again. Tab, 6 months later. Seattle in the spring was nothing like New York. The rain was softer, the people were politer. The coffee was better, but the pizza was terrible. Alara, now Sarah Mitchell, worked at a tech startup managing schedules and pretending she didn't miss the chaos of a trauma ward. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with a view of the Space Needle and furniture that came from IKEA instead of Craigslist. She had new friends who didn't know she'd once saved lives for a living. A routine that involved yoga classes and farmers markets. A life that was safe and small and nothing like what she'd left behind. And every night she took out Darian's letter and read it before she went to sleep. On a Tuesday in April, 6 months and 12 days after she'd left New York, Alara was walking home from work when she saw him. He was standing across the street, leaning against a lamppost, wearing jeans and a jacket she didn't recognize. His hair was longer. He had a beard. He looked thinner, older, more tired, but it was him. Alara stopped walking. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Darian saw her. Their eyes met across the street. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Darian crossed the street, slowly, like he was afraid she'd run. He stopped 3 feet away from her. "Hi," he said. Alara couldn't breathe. "You're not supposed to be here." "I know. They'll arrest you if they find out you broke protocol." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I couldn't stay away anymore." Darian's voice was rough. "Because I spent 6 months in Montana convincing myself you were better off without me, and I almost believed it. Then Luca told me what you did, that you testified, that you went into protection, that you gave up everything to finish what I started." Alara's eyes burned. "How did you find me?" "I'm good at finding people, especially people I'm in love with." He took a step closer. "Agent Chen is going to be furious. I might go to prison for this, but I needed to see you. I needed to know you were okay." "I'm okay." "Are you?" His eyes searched her face. "Because you look like you haven't slept in months." "Neither have you." Darian laughed, a broken sound. "No, I haven't." They stood there on a Seattle sidewalk while people walked past them, oblivious to the fact that 2 people who'd destroyed their lives for each other were finally, impossibly, in the same place at the same time. "What do we do now?" Alara whispered. "I don't know." Darian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands. "But I know I can't walk away from you again. I tried. It almost killed me. If you stay, they'll find us. Both of us. Then we run, together this time." That's insane. So is everything else we've done. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I'm not asking you to give up your life for me again, Alara. I'm asking if you want to build a new one. With me. Somewhere neither of us has to hide who we are or what we've survived. Alara thought about the warehouse. About Thursday dinners and radiators and the way Darian had stood up in a Greenwich ballroom and paid $100,000 for her dignity. She thought about the trauma ward, about Margaret and Victor and the patients she'd saved and the ones she'd lost. She thought about Katya and Sorano and Agent Chen and the passport with a fake name. And she realized something that made her chest ache. She'd been running her whole life, from grief, from loneliness, from the fear that she'd never matter to anyone the way she mattered to the people she saved. But Darian had made her matter, had seen her, had chosen her over everything, and she was done running. Okay, she said. Darian's breath caught. Okay? Let's go, let's disappear, let's build something new. Alara's voice was steady. But no more secrets, no more protecting me from the truth. If we do this, we do it as equals. Equals, Darian agreed. He kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of 6 months of longing. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Darian pulled out his phone. I have a boat waiting in the harbor, he said, and a plan to get us to Vancouver without being traced. After that, we figure it out as we go. Together. Together. They walked to the harbor hand in hand, got on a small fishing boat piloted by someone who didn't ask questions, disappeared into the Puget Sound as the sun set over Seattle. Agent Chen would be furious. The FBI would search for them. Their new identities would be burned. But Alara didn't care, because for the first time since she'd pressed her hands to a dying man's chest 4 years ago, she felt alive. Not safe, not comfortable, but alive. And that was enough. 3 years later, the small coastal town in British Columbia didn't have a name most people recognized. It was the kind of place where fishing boats outnumbered cars and everyone knew everyone else's business, but had the decency to pretend they didn't. Alara worked at the local clinic, not as a trauma nurse, her credentials were useless now, but as a medical assistant who did everything from blood draws to wound care to delivering babies when the doctor was stuck on the mainland. Darian ran a boat repair shop near the docks, fixed engines, replaced hulls, taught sailing lessons to tourists in the summer. They lived in a small house with a view of the ocean and a dog named Pancake who'd wandered up to their porch one day and never left. They weren't married. Too much paperwork, too many questions, but they wore matching rings anyway. A quiet promise that needed no legal validation. On a Saturday in November, 3 years and 8 months after they'd disappeared, Alara came home from the clinic to find Darian on the porch with a letter in his hands. What is it? She asked. He handed it to her. The envelope was addressed to Sarah Mitchell. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. Miss Wren, I'm required to inform you that the investigation into Katya Volkov's European network has been closed. All threats have been neutralized. You are no longer in danger. I'm also required to inform you that breaking the terms of witness protection is a federal offense. However, given the unique circumstances of your case and the fact that you've caused no further issues in the past 3 years, we've decided not to pursue charges. Consider this your official release from protection. You're free to resume your life under your legal identity if you choose. For what it's worth, I hope you found what you were looking for. Agent Sarah Chen. Alara read the letter twice, then looked at Darian. We could go back, she said quietly, to New York, to our old lives. Do you want to? Alara looked around, at the ocean, at the small house, at the life they'd built from nothing but stubbornness and love. No, she said, I don't. Darian smiled. Good, because I like it here. Even though you're fixing boats instead of running an empire? Especially because I'm fixing boats. He pulled her into his arms. Turns out I'm much better at building things than destroying them. Who knew? Alara laughed and kissed him. They burned Agent Chen's letter in the fireplace that night and never spoke of it again. 5 years after that. The clinic was busier than usual. A fishing boat had capsized in rough water, and 3 men were being treated for hypothermia. Alara worked alongside the doctor, wrapping blankets and monitoring vitals, and doing the same work she'd done in the trauma ward, just quieter and slower. When the last patient was stable, she walked home along the beach. The sun was setting, the water was calm. Pancake ran ahead, chasing seagulls. Darian was waiting on the porch with 2 cups of tea and a blanket. "Rough day?" he asked. Not compared to Queen's General. Alara sat down next to him. But hard enough. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the ocean turn gold in the fading light. "Do you ever regret it?" Darian asked quietly. "Giving up everything for this?" Alara thought about it. About the warehouse, and the Thursday dinners, and the charity auction where a dangerous stranger had paid $100,000 for her dignity. About the trauma ward and the patients, and Margaret and the life she'd left behind. About Agent Chen and witness protection and the passport with a fake name. "No," she said. "I don't regret it. Even though you can't be a trauma nurse anymore, I'm still saving lives, just in a different way." She leaned against him. "And I have you. That's more than I ever thought I'd get." Darian wrapped the blanket around both of them. "I love you." "I know." "Do you love me?" Alara smiled. "What do you think?" "I think you're deflecting." "I think you already know the answer." Darian laughed and kissed the top of her head. They sat there until the sun disappeared and the stars came out. 2 people who'd survived impossible odds and built something real from the wreckage. Alara thought about the night 4 years ago when she'd pressed her hands to a dying man's chest on a rain-soaked sidewalk. How she'd counted compressions and refused to let him go even when it seemed hopeless. She thought about the charity auction and the humiliation and the moment Darian had stood up and made 300 people remember what it meant to have dignity. She thought about Katya and Serrano and the warehouse in the Bronx and the moment she'd chosen to fight instead of run. And she realized something that made her chest ache with gratitude. She'd spent her whole life saving people, but Darian Volkov had saved her. Not from danger, not from death, from invisibility. He'd seen her when no one else did, had looked at a woman in a borrowed dress and recognized someone worth $100,000. Worth an empire. Worth everything. And in return, she'd given him the only thing she'd ever been good at. A reason to keep breathing. They were imperfect. Flawed. Built from violence and trauma and the kind of desperation that made people do insane things. But they were also real. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. "Hey," Darian said quietly. "What are you thinking about?" Alara looked up at him, at the scar above his eyebrow, at the gray threading through his dark hair, at the man who'd spent 4 years searching for her and then spent 3 more years building a life with her in a place where no one knew their names. "I'm thinking," she said, "that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Darian smiled. "Good, because I'm not letting you go. Ever." "I know." And she did know. Because Darian Volkov had proven, over and over, that when he loved someone, he didn't do it halfway. He loved with the same intensity he'd used to build an empire, with the same determination he'd used to survive a bullet to the chest, with the same relentless focus he'd used to find her in a ballroom full of people who'd forgotten she existed. And Alara Wren, trauma nurse from Queens, medical assistant in a small Canadian town, woman who'd saved a dying stranger and ended up saving herself, loved him just as fiercely. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because some people were worth fighting for. Even when the fight cost everything. Especially then. They sat on the porch until the stars filled the sky, and Pancake fell asleep at their feet. 2 imperfect people who'd found something perfect in the wreckage of their broken worlds. And for the first time in either of their lives, they were home. The end. This is a work of fiction. All characters, events, and organizations depicted are entirely imaginary and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental.